We all know that Halo Infinite drops holiday this year, and I honestly cannot articulate how much it genuinely excites me. And thinking about it, there aren't many elements that concern me as of yet, but with that in mind, there's been one thing that's been playing on my mind, and it's the fact that Halo Infinite will be launching on the original system Xbox One, Xbox One S, and Xbox One X. Of course, as well as the new system releasing this year, the Xbox Series X. The fact that this game is releasing on all of these consoles does kind of worry me, in the sense that we could be creating some restrictions for the game going forward, whether it be technically or mechanically. So in this video I'm going to break my reasons for this down, and I also want you to let me know in the comment section down below which system you'll be playing Halo Infinite on launch.
Ultimate Halo.
Hey up lads, Fletch here from Ultimate Halo, and please support my journey to Halo Infinite by subscribing to the channel and liking this video. It helps out a lot, and there'll be plenty more videos like this coming in the future. In this video we're going to cover multiple elements: cross-generation games, the power of the original Xbox One, the new Slipspace engine, and a bit about Halo Infinite on PC. However, I want you to please note that this is just a concern. I don't have much grounding in the sense that I know exactly what's going to happen. Of course, I'm not a developer, and I don't know the full depth of the new engine that they've created, but I feel like I have some strong points that we should all consider. I also want to say there are some positives of releasing cross-generation too. There's of course a larger market for the game, and it will benefit from more sales, meaning that the fan base will be stronger, and cross-generation is much different to how it used to be in the past, as it seems consoles are getting more as upgrades from what I understand, rather than completely different hardware infrastructures to allow us to play games on the same library we've been doing for many years. So, in 2013, the original Xbox One launched. No, not the original Xbox, even though that was a pretty cool console, actually. But no, the Xbox One. The specs of Microsoft's next generation console at the time were naturally stronger than the Xbox 360's, but it did seem that the console was weaker than the PlayStation 4. Halo MCC did launch a year later, all of which from a technical perspective ran fine to a degree, other than obviously the glaring network issues and the bugs, although it was noticed that the resolution for Halo 2 Anniversary was running at a 1328 by 1080, so not quite running at the full 1080p resolution fans may have been expecting coming into a new generation. Of course, there are considerations to this. There were two graphics engines running at the same time, and also the jump to 60 FPS was more demanding than the typical title, but it did show that the games were struggling to hit some of the fan expectations right outside of the box. Then in 2015, Halo 5 released. This game was supposed to run at 1080p 60 FPS, which it kind of did do, but the main concession it made for a solid frame rate was that they implemented a dynamic resolution system that would lower the resolution when the game was under a lot of strain on the engine, so it could keep the game running at 60 frames per second at all times. Eventually the Xbox One S and the X would release down the line, and would be able to experience these games at even better fidelity due to the 4K support of the Xbox One X in particular. So as we can see from the offset, the original Xbox One wasn't the most powerful, and it did have to make some sacrifices. But then next up, I want to look at when the console launched, because there were many titles that came out on both the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One. As I previously mentioned, it does make more sense early on in a console's life cycle to have games on both generations, because not everybody has yet adopted the latest one, therefore making sense to release on the previous generation, because it would have a huge impact on sales and obviously financially for a lot of these companies. I distinctly remember playing games such as Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I played this game first on the Xbox 360, and one of the things that I noticed was that it actually looked a little bit worse graphically than the previous title Assassin's Creed 3. And the reason why I believed this was the case was because they tried to implement a lot of new advanced mechanics, such as the dynamic ocean physics, which would have been quite demanding on the Xbox 360 hardware, so sacrifices will have most likely been required to ensure that the game could run. I'd also like to note that the Xbox One ran the game at 900p, whilst the PS4 ran the game at a full 1080p, which I don't want to dump on the original Xbox One because I do like it as a console, but it does add to my worries that Halo Infinite may have some restrictions in that respect. Now, with all of that noted, it seems to me that there's a real possibility there could be some setbacks. An example I want to use just for purely illustrative purposes, I'm not saying this is going to be an actual thing, but it's the question of how many AI could you place on the screen at one time. The Xbox Series X might be able to fit an absolute ton on the screen at one time, and it could be incredibly powerful. Then the Xbox One X might be able to handle it relatively well, but obviously by downgrading some graphical elements. But when it comes to the Xbox One original, that's where you really need to make some sacrifice somewhere. You either have to cut down on the graphics drastically to the point where they do not look good at all, or maybe potentially cut the amount of AI on the screen at one time. Personally, I do not think it's going to be the latter option. I think that's out of the question. The reason being because you need to be fair to all of the players in terms of the core experience of the game, and reducing the AI means that they're not getting the same challenge or experience for simply being on the previous generation of the hardware. But when you flip this on its head, they don't want the game looking like a hot turd on the original Xbox One either, because you want to give them an experience that's somewhat comparable. So what happens is you will cut the AI from all versions so that there's a standard benchmark that meets all of the consoles in the middle. This to me is what worries me most about Halo Infinite. I don't want to make out like we're seeing an end of world scenario for the game, because we're not, and 343 have most probably had the foresight to see this happen, and the Slipspace engine was made with that in mind. We all know that 343 wanted to give their developers the creative tools and the flexibility to make something great, and with all of their games running off Bungie's old engine previously, but just dolled up, it did provide restrictions to what they could do, and also, mainly, which is a big thing, to how they operated, because let's say in Halo 3 ODST for example, we had developers such as Joseph Staten even stating that he'd stay up all night just placing a single character model that was dead in the perfect position, and you had to rely on the ragdoll physics for them to be in the right place. It was a very inconvenient way to use a game engine, just because it had so many legacy elements that were holding it back. So then to add to this, when they were going into Halo Infinite, they would have also known that they were developing for the PC, meaning that the brand new Slipspace engine that they've been developing had to accommodate the various hardware setups as well. So from the low end to the high end, meaning that the scenario would be actually exactly the same for PC. As such, I really cannot tell if this has been planned for. I also have a strong feeling that this game was meant to be developed for the current generation of Xbox Ones, and being a launch title for the Xbox Series X most likely came later on into development, so they can just pretty up the game a little bit more than they've already made it. That to me seems a little bit more likely, but like I say, it's very hard to tell. You never know what goes on behind the scenes in these studios, and things do shift a lot, especially with Microsoft pulling the strings. They may not have known when the next generation of consoles were coming. It's hard to say. But if that was the case though, I'd have a lot less to worry about, I would think, because obviously the restrictions of the current existing consoles would have been considered right from the offset, and then maybe potentially the Xbox One X was the higher end benchmark, with that now being shifted up to the Xbox Series X just to make it look that bit better. I do have faith in 343, and I think they would have planned for this, like I say, and I think with Halo Infinite having more development time than any other Halo, I would have thought this would have been addressed quite a long time ago. When it comes to Infinite, I don't want fans to be shortchanged, because they do shell out a lot of money for consoles, and I don't think people always want to buy the brand new one as soon as it comes out, because there are that many variables to consider. Ultimately, I think it's best for Microsoft to hold their hands up and say that the original Xbox One isn't that powerful, and that they're happy to make some sacrifices on that version graphically, as long as the core experience is the same. But what do you think? My name is Jack Fletcher. You can follow me at FletcherUH on Twitter, and I want you to let me know what your thoughts are on this topic in the comments down below, and I will see you next time on the one and the only Ultimate Halo.
Subscribe now to Ultimate Halo for more unfriggin' believable Halo content.